Hi there and welcome to The Wrap. Simple news updates for busy people. Brought to you by me, Verashni Pillay, and the team at Explained.coza. In today's edition, we take a look at the DA's upcoming national conference, plus Ramaphosa's scathing letter to the ANC, and news briefs, international, plus your usual weekly dose of inspiration and the week ahead. So, let's dive in. Our take. It's time for renewal in the DA. Our official opposition, the Democratic Alliance, is gearing up to choose a new leader at its conference at the end of October. In the running are John Steenhuisen, Mbali Ntuli, and John Moody, all vying to fill Musi Maimani's vacated chair. Now, Steenhuisen has been in this job since Maimani quit the party in October last year, and he seems to be the frontrunner with Ntuli, the party's former youth leader, as the underdog hopeful, while Moody, the DA's leader in Gauteng, comes a distant third. We are hoping for Ntuli, underdog or not. The 32-year-old is a bright young politician who has worked her way up the party's ranks in unglamorous jobs like councillor and member of KZN's provincial legislature. She's also faced off against the party's former leader, Ndoyen Helen Zille, standing her ground and sticking to her principles. Also, the DA needs renewal. Steenhuisen represents the establishment within the party, who are leaning ever more towards conservative liberalism and shunning racial transformation. Steenhuisen also bungled the party's handling of the COVID-19 crisis. He's criticized the lockdown, even though the party initially supported it, and has hosted YouTube interviews featuring crackpots who deny the seriousness of COVID-19. And he has failed to stand up to Zille when she has said totally unacceptable things. Ntuli represents a younger, more social democratic faction of the party. Her campaign slogan is kind, strong and fair, which tells you a lot. She's also pushing back against the DA's decision to use an online voting system for the Congress. According to the Sunday Times, Ntuli told the party's leadership that the online system was open to abuse because it was not possible to verify voters and it could not be audited. Those are pretty serious concerns. Yet, the DA went to great lengths last Friday to defend the use of the system. Now, this is problematic. If the outcome of the election is challenged or rejected after the Congress, it will be the very last thing that an already battered and bruised DA can afford. I mean, we still have the ANC in power. This is a party that has presided over way too many scandals to even count, and its track record on governance is frankly terrible. And yes, the ANC share of the vote has been declining, but so has the DA's. The EFF only has about 10% of the national vote, so it's about as close to occupying the union buildings as Steenhuisen is to making peace with Black Twitter. But the EFF and other parties representing narrow and radical interests are the only ones growing in our country right now. This is really not good for us. We need an opposition party that unifies all South Africans with the necessary support to keep the ANC in check. So we're begging you, DA, don't screw this one up. Meanwhile, over at the ANC, shots have been fired. We did not see this one coming. President Cyril Ramaphosa wrote to the ANC membership on Sunday, bending the party over his knee and giving it six of the best. Metaphorically speaking, of course, corporal punishment is now against the law, so don't try that at home. He said South Africans were justified in their outrage at tender corruption related to COVID-19, which he called an unforgivable betrayal to millions of South Africans. Now, he wrote this letter to loads of ANC branches and leaders, and obviously it very quickly became public. In it, he said, "Today, the ANC and its leaders stand accused of corruption. The ANC may not stand alone in the dock, but it does stand as accused number one." Sheesh. That's a mammoth admission by the ANC and state president, and a far cry from the whole guilty until proven innocent stance the party usually takes when its members are accused of corruption. Now, we think Ramaphosa may have gone over the heads of the ANC leadership in writing the letter, which goes against the whole collective decision blah blah nonsense the party usually practices. And we think he might have actually done this to go over the party's Secretary General and Deputy President, Magashule and David Mabuza, who both stand accused of corruption. As the Daily Maverick Stephen Grootes has written, hopefully this marks the end of Cyril's style of decision-making by consensus, which is really wearing thin, and we kind of are all really tired of it. So it does kind of feel really good that there's grown up in the room, but what we really need to see is whether the ANC will actually listen. To their credit, it seems provincial leaders are rolling up their sleeves and auditing ANC members at all levels of the state, including government and the provincial and national legislatures. But how is it all going to play out? Analyst William Gomeri wrote in the Sunday Times this last week that the only way forward for Cyril would be to form a breakaway party, because the ANC simply cannot reconcile his clean-up group with the state capture faction still lingering in its ranks. Now that might sound like a dramatic scenario, but it's not the first time this idea has been floated. After the 2019 elections last year, the DA's James Self said that the party was positioning itself to govern in partnership with a constitutionalist part of the ANC led by Ramaphosa. Now, we know that sounds crazy, but the DA did once team up with the EFF, so stranger things have happened. And a real realignment of politics in South Africa would see more of these kind of coalitions happening. On to the news you need to know. Here are your briefs for this week. SA has done a fairly decent job of reducing COVID-19 deaths, Roundup reports. Now, many have latched on to reports that we have the 5th highest number of infections globally and are the worst hit country in Africa. But those two oft-quoted stats really don't provide the whole picture. Firstly, it's not really useful to look at the total number of infections in a country. It's more useful to look at it in proportion to the population, and it's more useful to look at deaths over infections. And when we look at deaths per million in every country, South Africa is only ranked 31st, not 5th. Plus, South Africa has performed more tests than most. We're at about 16th place for that worldwide, which is pretty impressive. And for a range of pretty convincing reasons by the publication, it's unlikely that South Africa has loads of undocumented COVID-19 deaths disguising our low total of deaths. As the publication put it, lockdowns work. They say, had we continued life more or less as normal after 16th of March, what would have happened? We have probably avoided a devastating flood of deaths. Yes, there were bad missteps by the government, but despite this, it has managed to reduce COVID-19 deaths. On to South Africa's perennial problem child, Eskom, the gift that never stops taking. Eskom faces a maintenance backlog at its power station, and with its complete lack of half-decent management, energy experts fear its power stations will simply carry on falling apart, City Press recorded this week. This is not great. More horrifying, the two biggest threats to economic recovery, according to economists, are load shedding and, to a greater degree, lack of government reforms. But are repeated attempts to fix the maintenance backlog the solution? South Africa's foremost energy expert, Chris Yellen, does not think so. He reckons Eskom should sell its problem power stations with conditions for the buyers that it can sell power from them for 20 years at reasonable prices. With a guaranteed income stream, investors can then pump money into the power stations. That sounds like a pretty good solution to us, but especially if it's paired with a massive boost in renewable energy, which government has been holding back on. Now, on to our jovial and hilarious finance minister. He loves a Twitter brawl almost as much as he loves sharing his torturous dinner preparations. This week's Sunday lunch was a disaster, Tito. That chicken was a crime scene. Lately, though, it's his shoes that have been getting all the attention. And Mboweni infamously wears shoes that seem, let's be nice and say, a bit worse for wear. And he gets quite a bit of flack for it. This week, Mboweni jovially hit back at his footwear critics, insisting that his shoes were from the shoemaker Clark's and cost over 1,000 rand, and that Ramaphosa wears the same ones. But look, we take cheap shoes any day over the likes of Mboweni predecessor Bruce Gigabo's sartorial choices, who, according to reports this week, allegedly used cash he got from the Guptas to pay for his fancy suits and footwear. No wonder he's way, way, way out of cabinet. A big shout out to Jacques Kallis, the former Proteas cricketer, who has just been inducted into the International Cricket Council's Hall of Fame. Think about it like getting a star in Hollywood Boulevard, but for cricket. Kallis is only the 4th cricketer from South Africa ever to have had this honour. We salute him while also hoping that he will be part of the larger change happening in cricket around acknowledging racism in the sport. Makhaya Ntini, the Proteas' first black player back in the day, recently revealed he was routinely excluded by his teammates, who included Kallis. The Hall of Famer has yet to respond. On to justice being served. A long time ago in a Pretoria Council chamber not so far away, our judicial umpires failed to strike back. 2 judges inexplicably exonerated anyone accused of corruption in the arms deal after a 4-year commission of inquiry. Now, a group of activists have complained to the Chief Justice about those judges, Willie Siriti and Hendrik Musi. They believe an investigation will show that the arms deal was stained by billions of rands in bribes, and the judges who let the guilty parties off the hook should lose their jobs. And on to your social media outrage of the week. Local actress and TV host Pearl Thusi landed in hot water this past week after excitedly announcing she would be interviewing retired comedian Mongezi Mahlangu, otherwise known as Tall Ass Mo. The problem? Mahlangu was accused of rape by actress Verashni Pillay earlier this month. He's denied the allegations. Now, Thusi faced a huge backlash. At first, she defended the choice, but BET Africa, where the interview would have aired, stepped in to say that the interview was cancelled. Finish and klar. On to your international news. Trump has a tough act to follow. It's a tale of two conventions in America right now. On the one hand, the Republican convention is coming up this week, where the party of Donald Trump will formally nominate his candidate for president. Spoiler alert, it is Donald Trump. The Democratic convention took place last week already, and former Vice President Joe Biden has been confirmed as the Democratic Party's candidate. You probably knew that already. Now, the virtual event was filled with inspiring speeches from the likes of Vice Presidential candidate Kamala Harris, Barack and Michelle Obama, Hillary Clinton, and of course Biden himself, with a surprisingly gaffe-free speech in which he promised to be a president for all Americans. Trump's speech is likely to be dampened by recent revelations. As the New York Times noted, a damning report has been released, authored by legislators from Trump's own party, concerning Russia's efforts to help Trump win in 2016. Plus, a government agency has revealed that a member of the president's cabinet is serving in violation of the law, not to mention a court ruling that Trump can't keep his tax returns secret. The race to open that big box of tricksiness is officially on. Now, unlike the Democratic convention, where progressives and liberals put their differences aside to rally around Biden within the party, solidarity appears to be in short supply at Republican headquarters. Some notable former leaders are set to be convention no-shows. Expected absentees include George W. Bush, rumored to be too busy washing his comb over on that night, Mitt Romney, unless hell freezes over, or Dick Cheney. More heart trouble, maybe? That would be weird considering he hardly ever seems to use his. Orcs. Instead, a collection of gun lobbyists and anti-abortion activists, as well as Trump's children, will give speeches and try to make America great again, somehow. Moving on to Russia, the list of Putin critics who find themselves dead or on death's door after speaking out against the Russian strongman leader is almost too tedious to recite, as Russian analyst and writer Masha Gessen wrote in The New Yorker last week. Now, Russian opposition politician Alexei Navalny has reportedly been poisoned. Of course, no one knows whether Putin had anything to do with it, but the fact that his opponents have a tendency to nearly die thanks to poisoning every so often is a pretty weird coincidence. Meanwhile, in a neat inversion, medical experts in South Africa have long been puzzled by our Deputy President David Mabuza's previous trips to Russia to be treated for poisoning. Whatever could he have to fear here, we wonder? And in Mali, President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta resigned last week after months of protests, supposedly over corruption and security issues. But experts say the fact that soldiers removed him from his home shortly before his resignation means that we need to call this what it is, a coup. Mali's military has promised not to hold onto power for too long, but can we even believe them at this point? In inspiration, cheers to Pinot. Would you straight up tell your bosses they're idiots in your first week in a new job? That's exactly what Tundi Pinot did, and we couldn't be prouder. Pinot was the chief director of the Gauteng Health Department supply chain for exactly 7 days when she blew the whistle on dodgy purchases for COVID-19 personal protective equipment. The result, she got suspended and insulted by her bosses. If you see Pinot, give her a bells. But it seems as though investigations into COVID-19 corruption at that department is really heating up, with a number of high-ranking officials being interviewed in the last week. Hopefully, it won't be long before that probe exonerates Pinot. And now for your week ahead. Expect to hear plenty of reports from the US as the election race heats up. Trump is bound to make headlines with his speech on Thursday. Locally, it's going to be an interesting week in politics. President Cyril Ramaphosa and Finance Minister Tito Mboweni have to appear in Parliament on Wednesday, and we're expecting them to be grilled on a number of issues, from corruption to South Africa's loan from the International Monetary Fund. This is what accountability looks like, so we like to see it. That's it from us, The Wrap, a product of Explained.coza. Simple news summaries for busy people. Remember to share the love. Tell your friends to sign up for the updates at explained.coza/subscribe. Till next time, goodbye from me and the rest of the team.